Spider-Man 2 is my favorite movie of all time. So much so that when I was a kid, I told myself when I grow up, I want to be just like Spider-Man. And now, as a grown man, I can say I did become just like Spider-Man. Not because I can shoot webs or stick to walls or have a special tingle. No. I became like Spider-Man because I'm broke and tired. Here's the thing. I rewatched Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And I noticed that the overarching villain in the film wasn't Doc Ock, it was capitalism. And capitalism is beating bro's ass. And look, although Peter Parker's relationship with Spider-Man isn't one based in capitalism, it still is work, and his relationship to that work exists within the same framework of a capitalist society. And because he lives and operates in the same system, the pitfalls he has in this film are the same ones that someone who's actively participating in capitalism can also fall into. Spider-Man 2 isn't just a fantastical story about a person's relationship with their superhero identity. It's a modern capitalist tragedy where a main character is trying to figure out how to maintain a work-life balance in a society that doesn't make it easy to have a work-life balance. It's the story of a man slowly grinding himself into the ground because he lives inside a system that rewards his hard work with more hard work. So, today we're going to be breaking down exactly what anti-capitalist theory is buried underneath the red and blue spandex, and how Sam Raimi used Peter Parker's life as a grand critique of the modern grindset culture that we live in today. Alienation of labor and the loss of self. Marx brought up the concept of alienation of labor. And that is the idea that capitalism strips workers of what he called the species essence. In a capitalist world, your creativity, your desires, your actual identity as a human being all get hollowed out and replaced by labor. Now watch what happens to Peter Parker in the movie. Being Spider-Man functions exactly like a 24/7 unpaid internship, and in the start of the film, we watch how this makes the man in Spider-Man evaporate. Peter's failing college. He's neglecting heavy-handed advances from the girl he's trying to build a relationship with. He doesn't have time to have long, intimate conversations with his friend Harry about his father's death, or about Aunt May and how he had a part to play in his uncle's death. So instead, he just chooses to carry the weight of these burdens, all because he's too busy being Spider-Man. I mean, if we're talking about a loss of self, this guy in the start of the film forgets that it's his own birthday. Bringing the intern theme that I was talking about earlier, like the stereotypical intern, he sacrifices his sleep, his social life, his mental health, all to chase this thing that's bigger than them. And that's Peter. He has surrendered his entire human experience to the suit. And in exchange, he gets an endless lonely grind and a scumbag landlord. With this loss of self often comes a negative feedback loop. We see it in the film where as Peter is losing more of himself, he just doubles down on the pattern and behavior that got him there in the first place because it slowly becomes all he knows. It's a sunken cost fallacy that many people often find themselves in. Yeah, you lose your humanity, you lose your connections, but you can always get that back because what you're doing right now is more important, right? Social reproduction theory. Philosopher Silvia Federici's work on social reproduction theory points out a flaw in this fundamental structure of capitalism. Society runs on a massive, invisible foundation of unpaid care work, feeding people, protecting people, holding communities together. And capitalism just does not compensate the people doing it, even though it's a necessary part of the system. Historically, this labor gets dumped onto women, on families, on communities. Communities, otherwise known as your neighbor, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a load-bearing pillar in this invisible foundation of unpaid care work. He doesn't get paid for stopping muggings, for rescuing people who are about to get hit by a moving car. The city treats his labor as a given, an unassumed public utility, like sidewalks or streetlights or stop signs. And yet the person providing this public care can't make rent. And yet not a single institution in the city can lift a finger to help him. His genuine, good-hearted desire to help people is the exact thing being exploited. Because he feels a moral duty, he lets himself be treated like he's disposable, grinding himself into the pavement while the system takes and gives back nothing. In the movie, it's framed as a noble sacrifice, but in reality, we see that it's completely unsustainable. The real-world equivalent of this would be like someone helping out at a homeless shelter or someone being a community leader in an area that has a lot of violence. These are systemic things that are needed in society that capitalism just simply doesn't budget for. Back to Spider-Man though. The wildest part, on top of him being a superhero, is that he has to get a job on top of all of it. Being a hero doesn't pay the light bill. But even then, as a regular person, he gets exploited. Double freedom. Marx pointed out that workers under capitalism are free in two senses: free to sell their labor to whoever they choose, and free of any other means of subsistence, like land, tools, or capital, that would let them survive without selling it. That second freedom is really a trap. Peter is technically free to say, "I won't sell you photos anymore, Joya Jonah Jameson. You're representing Spider-Man poorly." And he does. He makes the moral standing. But he has no land, no capital, no alternative income. The freedom to refuse is hollow, because with refusing it just means that he's going to starve. And that's exactly what happens. Jameson shrugs, then proceeds to fire Peter, then unfire him, playing with his livelihood like it's a keychain in front of a little toddler. And he creates the environment where Peter feels pressured to concede on what he believes in so he doesn't starve. Peter's principal protest lasts about as long as his unpaid rent does. And he's back to submitting to Jonah, giving him photos that are used to actively damage his own image as Spider-Man. But I mean, like, bro, it can't be J. Jonah Jameson's fault. I mean, if Peter really wanted to, he could just work harder. Hey, quick sidebar. If you're enjoying this video, please do like, subscribe, comment. It does a lot for the algorithm. I got the idea for this video after the Minions video, and I know that did the rounds online. So if you're coming from that, or if you're watching this and you're about to watch that, thank you very much. I just released 2 singles called Storm and Young Baba. Both of them have music videos that are on this page. So please do go check that out. If you like what I'm doing here, follow me on all my social medias at Ali has a cool username. Thank you so much, and back to the video. Mark Fisher has a concept called capitalist realism. The idea that when systems fail us, capitalism trains us to reframe that as a personal failure instead of a structural one. If you're struggling, the story goes, it's because you're not trying hard enough. Never mind the broken system, look inward. Grind harder. Peter often reflects on the Uncle Ben line, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a beautiful line, but in this film, it curdles into a crushing, impossible mandate that Peter holds for himself. Inside Peter's head, instead of accepting that one guy cannot possibly single-handedly fix an entire broken city, Peter tries to carry all of New York on his shoulders. And it's because of this impossible burden that he's placed upon himself. He starts cutting people off. He pushes Harry away. He pushes MJ away. He isolates himself completely because somewhere along the way, he decided that connection in the human experience is a luxury that he simply hasn't earned yet because there's one more person to save. The NYPD not being able to do shit in this film, in Peter's eyes, has nothing to do with him. The ineptitude of the police department isn't something that should come into question. It's just something he has to deal with. The city's actual paid infrastructure is failing constantly. And Peter can't accept this as a system problem because he thinks if he was there, he could have fixed it. This is the capitalist grind set mentality at its most destructive. Instead of asking for help, instead of questioning the systems that we're in and if they're really benefiting us, instead of trying to better these systems that we already have, our guilt often thinks that our suffering is entirely dependent on us. And our own physical destruction is just what we have to pay because we're not good enough yet. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but we've literally built $1 trillion economy around not being good enough and not achieving the optimal version of yourself. There's a whole market of alpha male grind set YouTubers that take people's insecurity that develops from the economic hardship that they're facing and morphs it into a personal failure that you can get out of if you just worked hard enough. And I'm sure if you've ever gone down the road of trying to grind set your way out of systemic problems, all that road leads to is burnout. Somatic burnout. Now, in the halfway point of the film, all these pitfalls in Peter Parker's life start to catch up to him, and his body starts literally giving up because it can't deal with all the stress and depression anymore. When a human body is chronically exploited without rest, without care, without fair compensation, eventually it stops asking nicely for you to take care of it and it just shuts down. That's somatic burnout, a term coined by Herbert Freudenberger. It's the body physically going on strike as the last line of self-preservation because it realized that the mind is clearly not going to do it on its own. That's exactly what happens to Peter. He can't make any more organic webbing and he starts falling onto buildings mid-swing. His spider sense flickers out, but his powers don't vanish because of any physical ailment. It's all mental, and it's finally refusing to cooperate. So once he's reached this point, obviously something needed to change in Peter's life. What was that something? Raindrops keep falling on my head. The turn. Existing under this capitalist framework, again, looking at Peter's job as Spider-Man as work, even though he doesn't technically get paid, Peter is failing on multiple fronts. Because of work, he's failing his classes. Because of work, all of his time gets put onto others. Because of work, he forgets his own birthday. Because of work, his friends stop being able to reach him. Because of work, he fails to meet social obligations. Because of work, he skirts around much needed long conversations that are clearly weighing on him. Because of work, his romantic prospect is slipping away right in front of his eyes. Because of work, he has to play a part in creating propaganda about himself just to meet ends meet. And funny enough, because of work, he loses the ability to do work. So Peter, after physically not being able to be Spider-Man anymore, stops. He takes time off. He tries to rediscover the man outside of Spider-Man. And it works. After the really dramatic dumping of the suit into the trash can, Peter's now able again to be an active participant in his class. He's able to just go on a walk and enjoy being present in his life. He's able to finally have hard conversations with Aunt May that, although are tense and they kind of suck to do, it alleviates the emotional burden that he had been carrying throughout the entire film. He can finally try to get his crush back from being a fiance. Yeah, that part is kind of not super cool, but I digress. But his calling never really leaves. It's still there, waiting for him. When the corner apartment building catches on fire, Peter rushes in, powerless, to save the little girl because he knows that his purpose is to help people. This then sends Peter into a moral dilemma where he questions how can he be both spider and man, because thus far it can only be one or the other. Both can't exist at the same time.
Am I not supposed to have what I want? What I need?
When one finds their passion, you will likely do whatever it takes to be able to make that passion into a reality. And once you have that, you want to make sure you don't lose it. So you pour everything into it. A lot of the times people fall into the fallacy that, oh, everything else in life can wait. I need to focus on my calling. And the system that we live in isn't going to tell you no. It's going to tell you to keep going. Compound on that work. Do more. Do more. Give me more output. I love surplus value. And you'll keep working and working and working until you realize, oh, I am nothing outside of this. And that is so detrimental to how you should be living your life. So what is the answer? It's chocolate cake. Peter's neighbor takes note of him going through it, and she decides to offer him a piece of chocolate cake with a glass of milk. And this might not seem like much at first, but in the same way that Spider-Man was looking out for people, Peter's neighbor was looking out for him. And that's where I feel like this film gives us the answer. And if you couldn't see it illustrated in the chocolate cake, you can see it illustrated in one of the best scenes of the film, which is the train sequence with Doc Ock. I think it's memorable for a lot of ways. It just visually looks really cool. But something that always stuck with me to this day about that scene is the ending, where Spider-Man passes out of pure exhaustion after stopping the speeding train. The community of people that he's protecting protect him back, grabbing him, picking him up, laying him down, giving him space to pick himself back up on his feet. And when the worst thing in the world that Peter can think of happens to him, where people find out his identity, the community compassionately doesn't take advantage of that fact. They swear to protect the secrecy of his identity because they appreciate how much Spider-Man does for them. And when Doc catches up to them, they create a human barrier on the train to save him. Albeit, it's a bit performative because what the fuck could they have done against those 4 tentacle arms? But I think that moment reinforced one of 2 messages that I think this movie gave that are really important. One is that you should and you can rely on your community to help uplift you in tumultuous times. This idea that the hero's journey is a lonely, sad one that you can only do by yourself is an outdated principle that's not realistic, that Sam Raimi, I think, perfectly illustrates with how the people of New York saved Spider-Man at the end of the train scene. The movie then has its climax and it wraps up pretty quickly after the fact, and we don't get to see that much of how Peter Parker operates immediately after until Spider-Man 3. But I like to imagine that the second thing he learned is that he can keep the burden and responsibility of being Spider-Man, but by setting the boundary of what that looks like, not letting it fully consume him, so that 1, he can continue being Spider-Man in a healthy manner, and 2, so he can actually have life outside of work. So the answer to Peter's question, am I not allowed to have what I want, what I need, isn't for him to pick Spider or man. It's for him to understand what both roles demand of him, and him setting a precedent on how much he can do of each role as to not undermine the other. And that with both roles, he doesn't have to burden himself by doing it alone, and he can rely on his community. It's not a perfect solution to this capitalist dystopia that we live in. I'm not saying that, but I do think that it shows what setting a healthy precedent is in your day-to-day as someone who is living in the capitalist framework that we find ourselves in today. Anyways, that's been my video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited for the new Spider-Man film. If you had any comments about this video or anything I missed or anything that I could add on to my point, please let me know in the comments. This has been Ali. I'll see you next week. Peace.